The median American household earned $80,610 last year. After taxes, that leaves about $62,000. Rent or mortgage eats $24,000. Health insurance another $8,000. Car payments, groceries, utilities, student loans. By the time you're done with the mandatory expenses, you're left with roughly $400 a month for everything else. That's $13 a day. And here's the uncomfortable part. If you're anywhere near that number, you're not falling behind. You're exactly average. Welcome to the American middle class in 2026, where doing everything right still feels like treading water in the deep end. This isn't a video about budgeting tips or side hustles. This is about the actual math of an average American life right now, what comes in, what goes out, and the increasingly narrow margin between surviving and thriving. Because somewhere between the inflation headlines and the stock market records, there's a silent recalibration happening in millions of households. A slow adjustment to a new normal that nobody really signed up for. So let's open the books. Let's see what the average American wallet actually looks like in 2026, how we got here, and whether the numbers you're seeing in your own life mean you're ahead, behind, or just stuck in the middle of something much bigger. And if this kind of breakdown is useful to you, if you want more videos that explain the real economics behind the headlines without the fluff, hit that subscribe button right now. We're building something here for people who want the truth, not the spin. Start with income. The median household income in the United States sits at $80,610. That's the midpoint. Half of households make more, half make less. It sounds reasonable. It sounds survivable. But that number hides more than it reveals. First, median income hasn't kept pace with cost increases over the last 4 years. Between 2021 and 2026, wages grew about 18%. Sounds good until you realize the cost of essentials grew faster. Rent is up 23% nationally. Groceries up 27%. Car insurance up 38%. Health insurance premiums climbed 24%. So yes, people are making more, but they're falling behind while doing it. Second issue, that $80,610 isn't take-home pay. After federal taxes, state taxes, Social Security, and Medicare, the average household clears about $62,000. That's $5,166 a month. That's the actual money hitting the account. Now let's see where it goes. Phone bill, internet, streaming services if you've got them. Let's call it $150 a month. $1,800 a year. And that's conservative. Most people are paying more when you add up Netflix, Spotify, Disney+, internet that actually works, and phone plans that don't throttle you after 2 gigabytes. Childcare. If you've got kids and both parents work, you're paying an average of $1,200 a month. But not every household has this expense, so let's factor it differently. For households with young children, this is often the single biggest expense after housing. For everyone else, it's zero. The national average gets complicated here because about 40% of households have kids under 18, but only a portion of those need full-time childcare. Student loans. The average monthly payment for borrowers is $350. About 43 million Americans have student debt. So for a significant chunk of households, there's another $4,200 a year. Let's add it up for a household with average expenses and no childcare or student loans. $56,828. Take-home pay, $62,000. What's left? $5,172 a year. That's $431 a month. For everything else, clothes, haircuts, car repairs that exceed the budget, medical expenses that exceed the deductible, birthday gifts for your kids' classmates, replacing the laptop that died, fixing the dishwasher, getting your teeth cleaned, buying new shoes when the old ones wear out, and any attempt at enjoying life. $14 a day. Housing first. Always housing first. The average monthly rent in America is now $2,018. For homeowners with a mortgage, the average payment sits at $2,100 when you include property taxes and insurance. Let's split the difference and call it $2,000 a month. That's $24,000 a year, nearly 40% of take-home pay. But housing isn't negotiable. You can't opt out. You can't skip a month. So that $24,000 disappears before you make a single other decision. Transportation comes next. The average car payment in 2026 is $739 a month. Gas adds another $200. Insurance, which has become absurdly expensive, averages $180 a month. Maintenance and repairs may be $100 a month if you're lucky. That's $1,219 a month. $14,628 a year. We're at $38,628 spent, and we haven't bought food yet. Groceries for a household average $800 a month now. Not eating out. Not coffee. Just the weekly shopping trip to buy chicken, rice, vegetables, milk, bread, the basics. That's $9,600 a year. And if you think that sounds high, go check your grocery receipts from the last 3 months. Compare them to 2020. The sticker shock is real. Utilities, electric, water, gas, trash, average about $250 a month. Another $3,000 a year. More in winter. More in summer if you're running AC constantly. But let's stick with the average. Health insurance. If you're getting it through your employer, you're paying an average of $500 a month for a family plan, $150 for an individual. Let's say $400 a month average across all households. That's $4,800 a year. And that's just the premium, doesn't include the deductible, copays, or the stuff insurance doesn't cover. We're at $55,028. This is the middle. This is average. And if you're anywhere near these numbers, you already know the feeling. It's not poverty. Poverty is a different kind of math, a different kind of stress. This is something else. This is the sensation of doing everything society told you to do. Get a job, pay your bills, be responsible, and still feeling like you're one bad month away from catastrophe. Because here's the thing about $431 a month. It evaporates. Your car needs new tires. $600. You're now in the red. Your kid needs braces. $5,000 over 2 years. Your dog gets sick and needs surgery. $2,000. Your water heater dies. $1,200. Your insurance deductible resets and you need that prescription refilled. $300. Your laptop crashes and you need it for work. $800. Any single unplanned expense that exceeds a few $100s creates a crisis. Not a dramatic crisis. Not a lose-your-home crisis. But a quiet crisis where you're pulling from savings that probably don't exist, or putting it on a credit card, or delaying something else that also needs to be done. And this assumes you're average. If you're a single parent, your math is worse. If you live in a high-cost city, New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Seattle, Boston, your math is catastrophically worse. If you're paying student loans, subtract another $350 a month. If you have any kind of medical condition that requires regular care, subtract hundreds more. The American middle class has become a tightrope walk where the margin for error is measured in hundreds of dollars. Let's talk about what you're supposed to be doing with money. Financial advisors say you should have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved for emergencies. For the average household, that's $15,000 to $30,000 sitting in an account you don't touch. The median American household has $8,000 in savings, which means most people don't have a 3-month cushion. They have a 1-month cushion. Maybe. And a lot of people have less than that. About 25% of American households have less than $1,000 saved. So when people talk about emergency funds, they're talking about something that exists mostly in theory for most Americans. Then there's retirement. The general rule is you should be saving 15% of your income for retirement. For a household making $80,610, that's $12,091 a year, about $1,000 a month. Remember that $431 a month we had left over? Yeah. The average American aged 35 to 44 has $141,542 saved for retirement. That sounds okay until you realize you'll need somewhere between $1 million and $2 million to retire comfortably, depending on your lifestyle and when you retire. Most people are decades behind where they need to be. The average 55-year-old has about $223,000 saved. They're 10 years from retirement and need to quintuple that number. So the advice is clear: save more. But the math doesn't allow it. You can't save what doesn't exist. You can't squeeze blood from a stone. And telling people they need to save $1,000 a month when they have $431 left over isn't advice. It's fantasy. Now here's where it gets psychological. You're living this math every month. You're watching every dollar. You're making choices between things you shouldn't have to choose between. New shoes or that doctor's appointment. Fixing the car or taking a weekend trip you promised your kids. But you're also living in an economy where the stock market keeps hitting record highs, where luxury car sales are strong, where high-end restaurants have wait lists, where people are still taking elaborate vacations and posting them online, where tech companies are minting millionaires and billionaires. So you look around and think, what am I doing wrong? The answer is probably nothing. What you're seeing is stratification. The economy is doing great for people at the top. The top 20% of earners, households making over $150,000, are thriving. They're saving. They're investing. They're benefiting from rising asset prices, from stock portfolios, from home equity gains, from job opportunities in growing sectors. These households have disposable income, real disposable income. They can absorb a $1,000 emergency without panic. They can save for retirement and still go on vacation. They can buy a home in a good school district. They're living the life that used to be considered middle class. The bottom 20%, households making under $30,000, are in survival mode. They've always been in survival mode. The safety net catches some of them. Medicaid, food stamps, housing assistance. Many fall through. But this group has always struggled. The math has always been impossible. But the middle 60%, that's where the squeeze is happening. That's where people are earning more than ever on paper but feeling poorer than their parents did. Because costs have risen faster than wages for the things you can't avoid, and the buffer that used to exist has vanished. You're not imagining it. The feeling that you're working harder and getting less, that's not a personal failure. That's the structure of the economy shifting underneath you. The median American household earned $80,610 last year. After taxes, that leaves about $62,000. Rent or mortgage eats $24,000. Health insurance another $8,000. Car payments, groceries, utilities, student loans. By the time you're done with the mandatory expenses, you're left with roughly $400 a month for everything else. That's $13 a day. And here's the uncomfortable part. If you're anywhere near that number, you're not falling behind. You're exactly average. Welcome to the American middle class in 2026, where doing everything right still feels like treading water in the deep end. Let's zoom out. How did we get here? Part of it is inflation. Between 2021 and 2023, the U.S. experienced the highest sustained inflation in 40 years. Prices rose fast. Wages rose too, but slower. And once prices go up, they don't really come back down. Inflation can slow, and it has, but that just means prices stop rising as fast. The new higher prices are the baseline now. A bag of groceries that cost $100 in 2020 costs $135 now. Your salary might have gone up 15%, but your groceries went up 35%. You didn't lose ground on paper. You lost it at the checkout. Rent is similar. Once landlords raise rents, they rarely lower them. A landlord who raised your rent from $1,500 to $1,800 during the pandemic isn't dropping it back down now that inflation has cooled. That $1,800 is the new normal. Same with insurance. Same with healthcare. The cost of living ratchets up, and it doesn't ratchet back down. So even as inflation cools and the Federal Reserve celebrates bringing it under control, households are still living in the higher-cost world that inflation created. You're not getting relief. You're just no longer getting hit with new increases. But there's more going on than just inflation. This squeeze has been building for decades. Real wages adjusted for inflation, have barely grown since the 1970s for most workers. Meanwhile, the cost of housing, healthcare, and education have all dramatically outpaced inflation. In 1970, the median home price was about 2.2 times the median household income. Today, it's about 5.1 times. College tuition has increased by 1,200% since 1980, while inflation only increased 260%. Healthcare costs have tripled as a share of GDP. So inflation from 2021 to 2023 made things worse. But it made an already difficult situation worse. It wasn't the cause. It was an accelerant. Housing is the clearest example. The average home price in America is now $412,000. To afford that home with a 20% down payment, that's $82,400 in cash, which most people don't have, and a 7% mortgage rate, you need an income of around $115,000. The median household income is $80,610. So the average household cannot afford the average home. The math doesn't work. Not even close. This is a new thing. For decades, the rule of thumb was that you could afford a home priced at about 3 times your annual income. Now it's more like 5 times. The math broke. And it's not just about saving for a down payment, though that's hard enough. It's about qualifying for the mortgage. Lenders want to see that your monthly housing payment won't exceed 28% of your gross income. For someone making $80,610, that's $1,880 a month. But the mortgage payment on a $412,000 house at 7% interest is about $2,745 a month. You don't qualify. The bank says no. Renting isn't much better. The rule used to be that rent shouldn't exceed 30% of your income. For a household making $80,610, that's $2,015 a month. The average rent is $2,018. So again, the average household is right at the edge of affordability for average housing. There's no buffer. There's no room to save. You're either maxed out or you're living in a place that's smaller, older, or farther from work than you'd like. And this creates a trap. You can't afford to buy because you can't save for a down payment because your rent is too high. But you can't move somewhere cheaper because cheaper usually means farther from work, which means higher transportation costs, which eats up the savings. Meanwhile, wealth inequality is at historic levels. The top 1% of Americans now hold about 30% of the country's wealth. The top 10% hold about 70%. The bottom 50% hold about 2%. Let that sink in. Half the country owns 2% of the wealth. If you're in that bottom 50%, you don't own stocks. You don't own a home. You don't have assets that appreciate. You're living paycheck to paycheck, and any wealth you might build is constantly eroded by the cost of living. This isn't a moral judgment. This is just the math. Wealth builds on wealth. If you own a home, its value probably increased over the last 5 years. If you own stocks, your portfolio probably grew. If you have neither, you're starting from zero. Every month. Forever. The American dream used to be work hard, save money, build a better life. But that formula requires a margin. It requires the ability to save. And for the average household, that margin has shrunk to almost nothing. Here's a term that doesn't get used much. Lifestyle recession. It's not an official recession. GDP is growing. Unemployment is low. The stock market is strong. By traditional measures, the economy is doing fine. But for millions of households, life is getting smaller. You're eating out less. You're delaying purchases. You're skipping vacations. You're not replacing things when they break unless absolutely necessary. You're putting off the dentist, the car maintenance, the home repairs. You're making 1,000 tiny cuts to your quality of life because the math demands it. And you're doing it quietly, because there's a stigma, because everyone else seems fine, because admitting you're struggling feels like admitting failure. But it's not failure. It's arithmetic. So where do you fall? If your household income is above $80,610, you're above median. You're doing better than half the country. But that doesn't mean you're comfortable. If you live in a high-cost area, if you've got kids, if you're paying student loans, your version of above average might still feel tight. If you're below $80,610, you're in the lower half. But that doesn't mean you're failing. Half the country is with you. The struggle is normal. The math is hard for everyone. If you've got $8,000 or more in savings, you're meeting the national median. If you've got less, you're in the majority. Most people don't have a cushion. If you're saving for retirement, if you're contributing to a 401k or IRA, you're ahead of a lot of people. Many households have stopped contributing because they need the cash flow now. If you're not carrying high-interest credit card debt, you're ahead. If you are, you've got company. Millions of households are using debt to make ends meet. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Being ahead in America today doesn't mean you're winning. It means you're losing slower. The average American wallet in 2026 tells a story of resilience and pressure. People are managing. They're making it work. But they're making it work with less margin, less security, and less hope that the math will get easier. There's an unspoken bargain at the heart of American life. It goes like this: work hard, follow the rules, and you'll be okay. You'll have stability. You'll have security. You'll have a chance to build something. But that bargain assumes a certain level of affordability. It assumes housing is attainable. It assumes healthcare is affordable. It assumes education doesn't bury you in debt. It assumes you can save. It assumes the ladder you're climbing isn't missing rungs. For a growing number of people, the bargain feels broken. Not because they're not working hard. Not because they're not following the rules. But because the rules changed and nobody announced it. So are you ahead or behind? Against the median? You can check your numbers. You can see where you fall. Against your parents' generation, most people are behind. The purchasing power of a middle-class salary has eroded. The ability to buy a home, raise kids, and retire comfortably on a single income is largely gone. Against your expectations? That's harder to measure. But if you're earning more than you ever have and somehow feeling poorer, you're not alone. The question isn't whether you're ahead or behind. The question is, how much longer can average feel this hard? If this breakdown hit close to home, if you found yourself nodding along to the numbers, you're not alone. Subscribe right now to stay ahead of the economic realities that nobody else wants to talk about honestly. We're pulling back the curtain on the math that matters. Every week. No fluff, just the real numbers. And drop a comment below. Where do you fall in all this? Are you ahead, behind, or somewhere in the middle? Because the more we talk about the real numbers, the harder it is to pretend everything's fine.